Good morning, good evening. So, welcome everyone who have registered for the SQL classes, SQL basic classes. Today we are going to cover the topics with respect to SQL, and we will see the roadmap of what we are going to cover. To start with, let me just introduce myself. My name is Girish Kovilkar. I'm from Skills Academy as your instructor for today. I have done a master's in computer application and I have over 16 plus years of experience in handling data analytics, data engineering, and data warehousing across various industry domains. I have also successfully led two data warehousing projects in my career span. I'm especially in handling data with respect to technologies like SQL Server, SSIS, SSRS, and Microsoft Fabric, Power BI, ADF, and all. Apart from that, I am also certified in Azure certification in Azure Data Analytics with Fabric. Then I also certified in DP900 and DP203. So those are the certifications I have done. So to start with, let us see what we are going to cover. So today we are going to see the introduction to SQL. It will be mostly a theoretical one for today. Then in the next class, we will cover on the relational database, where we will understand what is the concept of relational database. We'll see what is a primary key, foreign key, and why it is important. Then we will see the data types and constraint. Following that, we will see the different query syntax for DML and DDL. So DML and DDL are both a different stream, I would say. One is with respect to manipulating the data, and one is with respect to managing the data. Then we will see additional thing with respect to DML, which is filtering and sorting, as well as aggregate functions and grouping data. Later on, we will see a joint. So, if you are not aware, in SQL we have uh, multiple types of joint, like inner joint, outer joint, left outer joint, right outer joint, as well as cross joint. So that we will be covering. Then we will cover subqueries, as we are going to cover basics in subqueries. So we will see a nesting queries of up to level 2, not more than that, because that will be an advanced version of uh, handling queries. Then we will see a DCL, which is data control language, what we can do with respect to, you know, granting and revoking access of particular user or on particular objects, that we will see. And later on, we will see an advanced topics with respect to indexing, views, and functions and all. So to start with today's agenda, uh, what we are going to do is we are going to see the overview of SQL. Then we will see the history and evaluation of SQL. Later on, we will see on the importance, why SQL is so important in data management, uh, area. And then we will conclude the session. So to start with, what is SQL? Okay, so SQL is nothing but it stands for a structured query language, and it is a standardized language for accessing and manipulating data. We have used SQL for communicating between the databases for retrieval, updating, inserting, and deleting of data. Okay, so what are the key statement used in SQL? So there are two sets. So one set, select, insert, update, delete. So this set is with respect to the DML, which is data manipulation language. In short, select is used for selecting the data from the table. Insert is used for inserting the data into the table. Update is used for updating the existing data inside the table. And Delete is used for deleting the data. And then we have create, alter, and drop statements. So those are belongs to DDL form of it, which is data definition language. So it is used to define the structure of a database. So it is used for creating the tables, stored procedure, views, function, as well as altering and dropping of the objects. So SQL is nothing but an declarative language. So what do you mean by declarative languages? If you are aware, in IT or in programming, we have majorly two types of language. One is procedural and one is object oriented. Procedural language is nothing but it do one by one step at a time, whereas object oriented language is defined on based on the object, that object perform that operation, like that. But SQL is a declarative language where you have to specify the statement, like, you want to insert a data. Okay. So you will just specify insert into table name and then the values. But how the data is going to insert, there is a backend SQL engine which operates and which runs at the backend, and it does the data insertion for you. So you don't have to worry about how the data is being inserted. You have to just want to know the command. You have to give the declarative command to the engine. And then the database management system is is something that SQL is used. So there are multiple vendors which provide the database management system. Like we have Oracle, PostgreSQL, MySQL. We have SQL Server of Microsoft, SQLite, as well as Azure SQL. So there are many more SQL database provider where you can get those services and use it. So let us see what is the evaluation of SQL. How did it evolve? So at first, SQL was earlier developed in 1970 at the IBM Laboratory Research Center by Donald Chamberlain and Raymond Boyce. Initially, it was called as SQL, which is Structured English Query Language. And after some of the standardization by ISO NC standard, it was then declared as a SQL as a language. So we normally call it SQL or SQL directly. Anything is common. Nowadays we are using the just the same statement. So it was standardized around early 90s, and then later on it got used as a standardization in the major of the database management industry. So major milestone I would say is first the development of the language, which was done in early 1970s. Then later in 80s, it got standardized by ISO and ANSI standard. Then in 90s, the new feature got added, like SQL 92 was introduced. Then in 2000, if you see that it was continuously evolving till today. So at the end of 2000 or early in the 2000 years, SQL was having additional capability of handling XML data. It was handling trigger. It was created to build the procedures and so on. And now if you see, it is also handling the NoSQL type of database. So that is a modern evaluation of a SQL language and its usage. So it will be continuously improving and it will be continuously enhancing. So you have to know about the history and how it comes. Okay. Whenever you're it is required whenever you're going to use any of the versions, earlier versions. So let's say, for example, if any company has the older version of SQL, you need to know the limitation of that particular version. But most of the recent SQL are supported by XML trigger, stored procedure, uh, you know, external variables and all. Now, let us see the importance of SQL in data management. So why SQL is so important in data management? So basically, it is important for ambiguity and standardization. So since SQL is widely used across multiple database provider, it is common for all. So there might be some very minor difference in the syntax. Other than that, the concept is the same. So let's say, for example, if you're using Microsoft SQL Server, it is written as select top 10 star from table name. If you're using Oracle, you can use select star from table name and then you use limit 10. So it will give you the 10 rows. So that's a very minor difference you might see in the writing. But apart from that, the backend engine which is designed is to give the same result out of it. Then second thing is with respect to data retrieval and manipulation. So SQL is very efficient for data retrieval and manipulation whenever you have to do a data manipulation for larger data, right? So let's say, for example, you have to write thousands of rows. So SQL can do in just seconds. It will not take much time. Whereas if you have to do it programmatically, it will take little time because you have to read the data, you have to type it, you have to write it, and then it will go. But whenever you have to just copy paste the data into SQL, it will be very fast. So SQL has been supported by many vendors. You can also write a complex query in SQL in order to do an large data analysis. Then what is another importance of SQL is data integrity and security. So since whenever you are designing a database, what you do is you design it as a primary key, foreign key constraint with that particular things keeping in mind. So what it will do is, let's say for example, you have a parent table and you have a child table, and one of your parent record is referred in one of the child record, and in case if you're trying to delete any data in the parent table which is referred in the child table, it will throw an exception. It will throw an error saying that this particular record has been referred by your uh, child table in the foreign as a foreign key, so you cannot delete it. So like that, there are other constraints as well, which are defined to maintain the database integrity. And if you talk about security, SQL Server is very secured way of sharing the data because firstly the data is encrypted. Secondly, not anyone can access the database directly. The one who is either developing a database or having access to the database, or only authorized to the database can only have uh, access to the database or any of the data inside the database. We can also restrict the data based on the user role. So let's say, for example, I'm from finance and I don't want anyone else to see the data. So I can restrict that particular thing in the SQL access such that role-based access can be given for the developer as well. So what is the other thing which is important for SQL is to handle large volume of data. So as I said earlier, handling large data might be very complex, but it is not complex with SQL. So SQL handles, terabytes of data uh, like that. It does not take more time. It may take time depending upon the processor size of that particular server. But apart from that, if the processor size and everything is in place, then you can identify, how faster the data retrieval or data partitioning can be done. So it has many other features like indexing, partitioning, and you can do a query optimization in the SQL where it will help you to do the faster retrieval or faster insertion based on the index or based on the partition, or it can be also used for managing large variety of data type in single database. So what's next? What is the next important part if you see is a business intelligence and analytics. So SQL is very important for building any kind of analytics solution or business intelligence solutions in any of the organization. So let's say, for example, you have a clothing shop, right? Or you have a very large clothing outlet, and you are operating that particular outlet from last 5 years. And then you want to analyze, okay, when exactly my sale is high, when exactly my sale is low, why particular type of clothes are not selling this particular time frame. So those things you can analyze. But for that, you need all those 5 years of data in your database. Then what you will do is, since BIs rely on ETL, which is extract, transform, or load, or ELT, sometimes they do it as a ELT, which is extract, load, and then transform. So in that particular case, what you do is there is a transactional system from where you extract the data, you transform the data in your required particular logic or required particular format, and then you load the data into the destination system in the BI analytics system such that it can be useful for you for multiple purposes. Like, I want to see why my sales are slow. I want to see what is my cash flow. I want to see why I was having so much of trouble selling for one particular brand. It could be a seasonal change. It could be a climatic change. It could be a trend change, right? So all those things you can analyze with the business intelligence of, of that particular business. So that's why SQL is very, very important, or very important role playing for extracting those information and other things. So finally, what we are to do is we are going to conclude this for today. Okay. So today what we have covered is we have just covered the overview. We have seen the evaluation and history of SQL Server. Then what we have done is we have seen the importance, right? Why SQL Server is so important in the field of data. And then I think what I would suggest is you go on the internet and you do the research on the SQL, why SQL is important. Okay. So just to provide you a quick reference and resources for this slide. So most of the things are taken from the SQL in 10 minutes, you know, teach yourself by Ben Forta, and SQL for Data Scientist by Rene MP Teti. And you can also have some, online documentation, official documentation on the SQL DBMS on major SQL DBMS provider like PostgreSQL, MySQL, or MSQL, and so on. So if you have any queries, I would recommend to comment your queries so that we can answer it for you. And or you can just email us on inquiry@skillacademy.com for any additional questions. So thank you for joining.